Ladies and gentlemen, hit subscribe to this channel right now. This is huge. Supreme Court likely to curtail judges' power to stop Trump. Universal injunctions, nationwide injunctions will end or will be seriously curtailed very soon. It's imminent. This is a huge victory for President Trump. Newsweek is talking about it. There are other articles talking about it that I've referenced and cited in this channel. The issue, ladies and gentlemen, is that this is, I think, the 10th major victory for President Trump. We can go back overturning the Colorado State Supreme Court, overturning the absurd, unconstitutional, despotic Colorado ban that tried to prevent President Trump from being on the ballot of every state. Democrats lost there. That's the first loss. Second major victory pertaining to, what's taking place was the immunity victory. Democrats tried to imprison their direct political rivals. They can't do that just because Trump performed a speech they didn't like. Okay, how many times did Biden lie in speeches stating that he was going to stay in the presidential contest, only to be usurped by his vice president? Was he lying? Should we have indicted him under 18 U.S. Code 371? Well, there were other issues. I mean, there were Hunter's laptop full of potential possible graft and bribery. That's why everyone around him was preemptively pardoned. God bless him. I know he's going through tough things right now. Wish him only health and the best and happiness, Biden. But he preemptively pardoned everyone for a reason, which gets to also the Hunter laptop and the censorship, just to silence any discussion about the corruption within the Democratic Party. We saw that with the DNC emails. They cheated Bernie Sanders, they cheated Biden, they silenced people from discussing, and then they tried to create a disinformation governance board as they continue to lie through their teeth. We can go on forever. But there's Chevron deference. There is like 3 different victories recently. One, a Doge victory in the Supreme Court yesterday with John Roberts, reversing Biden-era policies pertaining to undocumented immigrants. There was the Alien Enemies Act. Oh, there was another issue, the initial Alien Enemies Act decision. Then there was another victory just the other day pertaining to Trump and Doge. He's able to fire anyone he wants in the executive branch. So that's 3, how many, about 5, 6, 7, 8 victories. I'm not even counting a whole bunch of others in the Supreme Court the past 2 years. 8 to 9 major victories. And lower courts have been routinely wrong. And even Elena Kagan stated that it can't be right, and I explained this yesterday. She stated it can't be right that one judge can issue a nationwide injunction and stop the president's agenda in its tracks. One federal judge, 600 different federal judges in 90 different regions of the country cannot simply stop the agenda of a president who just won the popular vote. Sorry, Democrats, if you lost the popular vote, and that's with Democrats receiving 90+%, 95% positive media coverage, and Trump virtually 100% negative media coverage. But listen to this, ladies and gentlemen. It's imminent and it's huge.
After 3 or 4 or 5 years. And we say, we really do agree with those 4 precedents that Justice Sotomayor started with, and your EO is illegal. Is that only going to bind the one guy who brought this suit?
No, that would be a nationwide precedent that the government would respect.
So finally, once it gets to us after 4 years, you're going to respect that?
Yes, and in addition, we may well respect circuit-wide precedent. The Second Circuit, it just is.
And for 4 years, there are going to be an untold number of people who, according to all the law that this court has ever made, ought to be citizens who are not being treated as such.
And in the meantime, any of those plaintiffs could have come forward and sought, preliminary injunctive relief, and they could do so on a class-wide basis. There are tools to address this, but the universal injunction, which is issued here 3 days after the executive order was issued, is not one of those tools.
Thank you, counsel.
Zero rebuttal from Justice Kagan. Why? Because Justice Kagan herself was against universal injunctions 2 years ago when Biden was in office. This is going to be such a huge victory for President Trump. Now Democrats are going to have to stop Trump's executive orders in court. And in Congress. And of course they can't legislate because they don't want to pass any bills protecting, for example, undocumented immigrants who potentially committed crimes. They could pass a bill tomorrow preventing undocumented immigrants, or they could try to. They don't have the House, they don't have the Senate, but they could run on legislation, and they can say, look, once we get back to the House, we're going to run legislation that protects undocumented individuals who potentially committed crimes. They don't want to run on that legislation, but that's their value system. So again, we have a completely dysfunctional political party.
3 years, 4 years, we've been able to move much more expeditiously. I think we did the TikTok case in a month. Presuming, I gather an important part of your answer is that people can litigate differently, and one will go to Massachusetts, the other one will go to Houston, and you'll get conflicting decisions fairly quickly. Is there any reason why this court, and I gather that's your safety net, is that at the end of the day, however long the day is, this court can issue a decision and it will bind everything else. Is there any reason in this particular litigation that we would be unable to act expeditiously?
Absolutely not, Mr. Chief Justice.
Okay, thank you. Justice Thomas?
General, when were the first universal injunctions used?
We believe that the best reading of that is what you said in Trump against Hawaii, which is that Wirtz in 1963 was really the first universal injunction. There's a dispute about Perkins against Lukens Oil going back to 1940. And of course, we point to the court's opinion that reversed that universal injunction issued by the D.C. Circuit and said it's profoundly wrong. Now, if you look at the cases that the either party cite, you see a common theme. The cases that we cite, like National Treasury's Employment Union, Perkins against Lukens Oil, Frothingham in Massachusetts against Mellon, going back to Scott against Donald, and all of those are cases where the court considered and addressed the sort of universal, in that case, statewide issue of provision of injunctive relief. So when the court has considered and addressed this, it has consistently said you have to limit the remedy to the plaintiffs who are appearing in court and complaining of that remedy.
So we survived until the 1960s without universal injunctions.
That's exactly correct. And in fact, those are very limited, very rare, even in the 1960s. It really exploded in 2007 in our cert petition in Summers against Earth Island Institute. We pointed out that the Ninth Circuit had started doing this in a whole bunch of cases involving environmental claims.
Justice Alito?
You began.
So we survived up until 1963 without nationwide universal injunctions. What a brilliant, brilliant statement from Justice Thomas. And even Elena Kagan, Justice Kagan, nobody wants these universal injunctions. There's nothing in the Constitution, Article 3, there's nothing in the Constitution that says one federal judge can issue a nationwide injunction. They can issue injunctions, but for the region that the court resides within, not nationwide. And AOC said the same thing. AOC and Ron Wyden 2 years ago literally told Biden not to follow a conservative judge's conservative federal judge's nationwide injunction. AOC said, "Do not follow the injunction," to CNN.
By outlining what you see as the practical problems that have been created by universal injunctions. If we were to hold that the states have standing, and if it is possible for a plaintiff to get emergency certification of a class, suppose we agreed with you on universal injunctions, but allowed those other two avenues, would the practical problem be rectified to any substantial degree?
Certainly, if there were an injunction that extended to, all of the litigating states, that would cover a very substantial portion of the country, and also an emergency sort of class certification decision might also grant very broad relief.
So the answer is that the practical problem would not be solved. And if that's the case, what is the point of this argument about universal injunctions?
I think the point is that universal injunctions exceed traditional principles of Article 3, and they exceed the traditional equitable authority. And that's what yields all these sort of pathologies, so to speak, of the current practice of issuing them very, very easily.
Thank you.
Justice Sotomayor?
You answered Justice Gorsuch, I think, correctly.
And so, ladies and gentlemen, we have a situation where Democrats are now going to have to go through Congress to stop Trump's presidential executive orders. They don't want to go through Congress. They don't want to pass any legislation, whether it's Medicare for all or single bid. They don't really believe in any policies aside from policies that their voters really actually aren't passionate about. Anyway, hit subscribe to this channel. President Trump is doing a fantastic job. What happened to the stock market? All these people hyperventilating. Oh, that's right. Anyway, hit subscribe to this channel. This is huge.